Can we begin by talking about double acts?
Yes.
And maybe you talk about some of your favourite double acts.
A lot of the double acts as such don't seem to work in the same way that we work. I mean, like Eric B and Rakim and KRS and Scott La Rock and people like that. It was very much purely because in them days, although the MC was the front man, it had traditionally been the producer. But do you know what I mean? It was very much their KRS One records are really, and they're Rakim records rather than Eric B having anything to do with it. Whereas the way we work is far more, it's an equal a leveling, and we go back and forth. With a lot of them guys, you get the impression, particularly with KRS, it would have just been, here's a beat playing, and he'll go over the top.
There's often that dynamic of one being the front, the leader or the controller.
Yeah.
And when you look at comedy as well, you always think of, not particularly good comedy, but it's look at Gavin and Stacey, Horn and Corden.
Yeah.
You always get the feeling that Horn's the boss.
Yeah.
But it's Corden. It's Corden all the way. He writes. He was the funny one. Matt Horn's just a straight man for the... And Morecambe and Wise as well. That I don't know, there's a definite leader and a teacher and pupil sort of thing.
So do you have that relationship? Is there a boss? Is there a leader?
Well, he's definitely the face in that sense. He's
Or the beard, as it's more definable.
Yeah. And you drive more of the content, the actual stuff to talk about with non-music fans.
Yeah.
That's it. The stuff that's easiest to talk about because I do the lyrics. So there's instantly subject matters and things to discuss. Whereas musically, there's tons to discuss as well. It just you have to be a music fan.
Now, the word hip hop. You know, I think you've said before that it means so many different things to so many different people. Was there a world where you both found that you thought of it in the same way, which was also enabled you in a way to come together?
Yeah, I think our areas of hip hop that we come to is
overlap.
Overlap. Yeah.
So we're both into what, in a literal sense, what we're into is very similar with the Sage Francis stuff and Aesop Rock and that sort of collegey, rucksacky hip hop. Well, it's quite liberal thinking and not too braggadocious, but that we like that in hip hop because that reflects who we are. Neither of us are exactly bling, and I would have thought our clothes add up to about 80 quid between us, maybe.
If that.
Do you think the compulsion on a certain sort of home-grown hip hop is comes from the American idea? And the patterns that are established there, and somehow there's a sense that they've got to copy that, or it isn't hip hop as such.
Yeah, I mean, it's whichever one comes across or is easiest to export. I mean, a gangster rap, and then just not even gangster, but just more braggadocious is the stuff that comes over the most. So you have that weird juxtaposition of people doing that kind of rap, but not with these big expensive videos on council estates on Channel U, and it's like you can't be doing a braggadocious hip hop on a phone cam kind of thing. It doesn't really come that. It's a really weird contradiction. It's an oxymoron.
Something about how we learn to make music. So the first time you get given a guitar, you get taught Amazing Grace. So you get taught to imitate it, to learn other things. So those producers coming up through the East End of London, the first thing they're going to do is try to mimic those songs that they love. So sort of it's a passionate response, and although sometimes they're not aware enough to think, actually, this makes no sense.
I'm going to ask you a question about what I like to call 0.2, which was your rating in Pitchfork.
Yes.
That was interesting because there is a world from the outside that maybe nobody had actually heard what you were doing and really experienced it, that they would have thought, I figured, i.e., if I may be so bold, Goldie Lookin Chain, Tenacious D, that area where it can
definitely.
just be the novelty, can be the laugh, and clearly the Pitchfork review decided that's what it was.
The one thing that annoyed me, and I had to bite my lip on responding and answering back, because that's always the suicide, because you just look like an idiot. But he had one thing of, he was saying, number one, he pointed out that the lyrics in Thou Shalt contradict themselves, which is the whole point of it. It's not really, it's hard to figure out. But he made a point of saying that I say that the guns, bitches and bling aren't part of hip hop, yet I praise a Johnny Cash who sings about guns all the time. But the very nature of that is just, it's poorly researched and inaccurate, because Johnny Cash is country, and the genre of country was started and based on telling stories of who you've killed, and to build a reputation, things like that. Whereas hip hop was started as the exact opposite. It was started to bring, with Cool Herc and Africa Bambaataa and that, to bring projects together and give them a way to either just interact or battle over turntables and mics, rather than with guns and knives and fists. So the whole point of that was that one was started to not be about guns. That's why it's kind of irrelevant to it. And country was like, that's what it's about. It's different genres. I'm not saying that we should never speak of guns and never utter their name.
But I've always felt with that review that the people who read it and just take it for granted and walk away weren't going to like us anyway, weren't going to buy the records anyway.
But what about the idea of, which you must have been aware of, the Goldie Lookin chain cul-de-sac, and the idea that it would just be
I mean, a Thou Shalt just came out of nowhere so quick, and it wasn't what the pop charts are traditionally used, and the video was made for for 200 quid, and it all just kind of came out of nowhere. So there was always that element of people assuming a novelty. But I mean, that's one of the reasons we didn't rush the album out. There was encouragement to get an album out immediately, but we took a year to write and put the album, because we were aware that we're not here to just go quick, cash in and do something. We love music and want to keep making music.
We've had some level of success, but not just letting what comes out come out and be happy with that, and not try to bend that to fit some perception. And maybe with Goldie Lookin Chain, when you listen to the first album, the production's really quite fun and exciting, and there's no reason why they couldn't have gone on to be working on other projects and just writing pop songs or whatever. But because they decided we've got to now equal that.
But is it also, in a funny sort of way, a disadvantage to be funny, even though the satirical and the witty edge of hip-hop is also an important element? But by being funny, and obviously blatantly funny in a much more English way, literally with your psychedelic back reference to Edward Lear, etc. That itself is a danger.
I think putting elements of humour in any kind of writing is a real positive thing, and particularly when we address so much dark and serious stuff. I think it's essential for me as a writer. I need to have that, so that, number one, I'm not going absolutely insane performing these songs every night that are all about self-harm and suicide and misery and it's just it's to make it, it's the sugar to make the pill easier to swallow. Hopefully.
It's that idea which I kind of hold to sometimes, that the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band were actually better than the Beatles. And in that story of pop, you fit into that, I think.
And labels have got it wrong anyway. The reason it's when acts are allowed to be themselves that people fall in love with. Everyone, or Amy Winehouse has become as famous as she is because it's such a juxtaposition between the way she sings and the songs she performs and this weird little character there is. And people like Adele and Paloma Faith, I love the fact that their labels haven't tried too hard, because you can't edit them in interviews. They're still going to be... all right, and just they're going to have real strong characters coming through, and they can polish the videos and the music and the albums as much as they like, but people will become really loyal to them because of the people they are and their odd little quirks and personalities, which is great.
Can I ask you a question, as music nerds and as music lovers are very much at the moment, we're just surrounded, it's a glut of music. It's just everybody does it because they can. And the idea that you contribute, by putting anything out at the moment, you're basically contributing to a glut, whether it's cheap thrills or deeper thrills, it's still a glut. So I wonder what you feel about that, whether you're just joining in the glut or you still feel there's a way that something important and something that has an impression upon people in a serious way can still exist.
Or for me, I want to make music and put out records, and it's tough to criticise. I mean, we were discussing this on the radio the other day about how there are certain people in certain sounds that it will be, you're making it just to sell loads of records and you're selling your soul in a way. But in general, in a way, we're all in the same boat, because although we're only putting out music because we have a passion to make this music, if you're releasing music, as you said, you are adding to that glut, and so it's inescapable. But you shouldn't restrict Do you know what I mean? What you want to do or what you're making to avoid that. That could stop the next Bob Dylan or whoever making music, because they will be the people who are more conscious of that and thinking, no, it's ridiculous now. I'm not going to make it because, which would be, a tragedy.
But that glut, the machine that's behind music now, the thing that feeds Fern Cotton everything to play. People forget that with Fern Cotton makes Radio 1, that daytime stuff makes Radio 1 listened to by millions of people, which in turn makes it valid and worth the taxpayers' money, which means Hugh Stevens gets a salary, which means Zane Lowe gets a salary, which means Rob the Bank gets a salary. And
they can find and
us little kids get to turn on Hugh and go, wow, what's that label? Wow! You know, and it's, let the glut happen.
I mean, I was working at H&B when the first
when it
James,
came out.
when the first James Blunt one came out originally on the first release, and it wasn't huge, and it was all the kids who were buying a Damien Rice and the more slightly left field guitar that were buying it, like, this is the best thing ever.
Funny the way we get so sensitive about whether if we attach ourselves to one particular thing, it somehow makes us look completely stupid. So I have arguments with people about Coldplay, sort of as if somehow if I admit I might like Coldplay, somehow that would make me a lesser being, It's
I get swayed with Coldplay by the people who like them as well. Like
that's the key thing.
Simon Pegg was on Six Music talking, and he played us he had a 2-hour show. He played us, but he also played Coldplay, and it made me think, if Simon Pegg, I might be missing something here.
If you're talking about the ideal radio show and what you would be, I guess this is an awful question along the idea of if you like this, or your influences. But I'm going to go ahead with it anyway. If there was a radio show and you were amongst, the kind of things you ideally in your head when you think about what you do would want to be positioned, what would be the things around you?
I mean, for me, it is a lot of more American based, but a lot of underground hip hop. People like POS, Sage Francis. Like at the label, we released angles on in America. Strange Famous is just for me, everything that I've heard from that label and releasing it is stuff that I'm into and think is great, which is rare for me because I've never had that great loyalty with labels. There's always been labels I like, but there's a lot on there I don't like.
Strange Famous, does that make you something then? Does that make you a genre? Unavoidably?
In a way, but I mean, Strange Famous had a bit of a backlash because we don't plug into that exact genre and sound because Thou Shout was tongue-in-cheek, and there are some lines which aren't that poetic. They are quite having a laugh and messing around. And they had a bit of a thing with that, but it was a great... that's a Sage was just like, well, I like this album. I think it's got, it's not the same as all the other stuff that's on our label, but it's coming from the same place, emotionally and mentally, I think.
Yeah. And what is that genre then? The Strange.
Again, it's all it's just underground. Yeah, it's hip hop, but it is very much.
We have to add these words.
Underground and conscious.
But is it conscious?
It is conscious. But again, conscious hip hop is something that I now lean away from because people like the Common and all that it got a very noodly for a while and got a very overly spiritual and things like that. So a lot of people will put conscious hip hop with extremely spiritual and things like that. So it's really...
But it's a shame that the genre names aren't better in a way. Like I'd rather have just conscious or chocolate. The idea that somehow...
Because it would move stuff that was...
they've become very scientific, haven't they?
Because the genre name is often, the core name, the hip-hop, is often something about tempo and the musical style. And if we lose that word and just have the word conscious, we can bring Billy Bragg next to Sage Francis.
And put what you should be listening to as a full...
And if you go through your record collection, my record collection, his, you will find a theme in there, and it you might have to dig very deep, but there is something in there that will tie it all together.
And it's something we get all the time. I mean, even today we get people on Facebook and MySpace and saying, I don't normally listen to hip hop, but and it's like, well, that shouldn't be a restriction. A genre shouldn't be a restriction. And it is kind of, we're putting them kind of names, it is a restriction. And even, I guess, if we stripped it to conscious and things like that, it'd put a restriction on, because people think, I don't want to listen to something that's going to be preachy. And I mean, so I long for the days or more when I worked in a record shop, because it would have been easier, where you just have the music section and it's in alphabetical order, A to Z, as simple as that.
I'm of an age where it still is, everything is file under pop.
But yeah, it should just be music.